Today's video, it's going to be broken down into 4 areas. The first one is going to be perspective, looking at the role of salary increases and how they and why they are important to people within careers. We're going to be covering things such as the actual negotiation process itself. Another thing we're going to look at is the job offer, and then finally the remuneration package. Why is increasing your salary important, outside the obvious? There is some other things to take into account. And some people think their worth, their net worth within a business, with every year that they're employed or every year they're in the industry, that gives them grounds to be a more valuable entity, and therefore someone who should have a higher salary in alignment with their skill set. However, this is not always the case. One thing to really take into account, life is busy, you don't always think about some of these things. Inflation itself has an impact directly related to people's spending power. As inflation increases, ability to get services and products for your money decreases. At the time of this recording, inflation in Australia is at 2.9%, and for those of you watching in the US is at a staggering 6.8%, which when you look at last year, it was up from 1.2%. So the increase is from 1.2 to 6.8 within a year. What we'll see is, unless your salary has at least improved by that same percentage, you're actually going to be going down in income, despite having a year's more experience, purely based on inflation alone. And increasing salary by 6% just to meet inflation is quite a tall order. And when I'm talking about the purchasing power difference, we're taking this into account based on your gross income. When you have to pay quite a large portion of that to the government, when you have a net income left over, and everything costs more money, you're really seeing that dwindle down further and further. So, if you're not moving forward, you're moving back. Understanding the whole perspective and also some of the pressures on your employer as well may help you navigate the process as effectively as possible. Sometimes employers, faced with some of these issues, will flat out refuse to increase your salary. They'll quote economic factors and financial business performance as some of the excuses why they are going to maintain your salary. God forbid, decrease it in hard times. And when you're taking into account what we've just discussed and the need to continuously increase your income, you need to look at, okay, either I stay here and my wealth will be eroded by inflation. Another option is job swapping, finding a new job. That can be a way to get ahead of the curve. So, you can have these conversations with your employers, and a lot of the time, based on some of these financial business problems, some of these economic factors, they may be in a situation where they simply can't or won't increase your salary, and your income and purchasing power is being eroded by inflation. So you're faced with a bit of a difficult situation and a choice to make. Either you stay in that situation and hope for the best, and a lot of people do, or you bite the bullet and find another role. Looking to try and move to another job for the primary purpose of increasing your income, it's not something that I recommend in every case. However, sometimes I will admit, it can be necessary. And if it's a process that you're going to go through, there are people who can help you with that. It can be possible to get an increase of anywhere between 10 to 30% with the help of a recruitment agent, or even going directly and applying to jobs. There are circumstances of actually higher increases, up to doubling your money in some cases. But bottom line is, an increase can be made. One thing to take into account is you've got to be careful where you're pitching yourself, because if you come in and you're you've done everything right, and to some extent they may have been in a difficult situation, and you've somewhat taken advantage of the fact that they really needed someone and have been prepared to pay you more than what the market would offer someone with your skill set and experience. What you can inadvertently be doing is painting a little bit of a target on your back, because if the business then at some stage in the pipeline of work decides to come down, they have to restructure, change of management, they may look at their cash flow, they may look at their profitability, and they may look at, okay, well, this person is more expensive than other people in the business, or they're getting paid more than I think they should be. And sometimes it's the case of the person who comes in last is the first one to go. So you've got to be careful a little bit when you're hopping or you're swapping jobs for financial incentives alone, when in all reality a lot of the time people will make a decision on a lot more than just that. But changing your job for $5,000 or $10,000, sometimes when you take into the actual tax net amount that you get each year, to swap that one job for another, it really is a lot of extra cash in hand, sometimes not enough to outpace inflation. So be careful and make sure you do so, investigating and making a balanced decision. Sometimes you're between a rock and a hard place, and you know that you're at a ceiling and you need to make that move. In certain circumstances, it's completely legitimate. What I would recommend and what I would suggest to you, don't move more than twice in a 5-year period. From a recruiter's perspective, don't do that, and don't leave a job if you can avoid it without being there for at least 18 months. Some people say 6 months, some people say 12. I would disagree with all that. I would say you really need to be there for at least 18 months. That's the magic amount in my opinion. The first 6 months really is, okay, can they perform? Okay, they've got through that, there's no real reason there. But it's really just then a matter of, is this person able to commit to the business? We spend all that time bringing them on, training them up, and then they leave. They've got a repeated history of leaving after short periods of time. And I'll look at that and I'll say, there's no continuity of employment history. We're going to actually opt out and not bring this person in for an interview. So invariably, it's going to come back and bite you. When the recruiter gets the job application come through, this person looks great. They've got the right companies on there. They've been there for, in the industry, within the local company for 2 or 3 different businesses, the right projects, all that sort of stuff. Tick, 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 tick. And then all of a sudden they start looking at, you were here for 6 months, you were here for 8 months, you were here for 12 months, you were here for etc., etc. The first thing they're going to think is either 1, were they doing short-term contract positions, or 2, why weren't they there for longer periods of time? That could be because 1, they can't meet expectations performance-wise. 2, they have issues with cultural alignment. They are a sore thumb, they stick out, they don't get along with people, they're difficult, they get let go because of that, or they self-opt out, or simply that you can't commit. And if it comes down to them thinking that you can't commit, they're going to have a lot of reservation in offering you a position, because people want a commitment, a long-term commitment when they're hiring someone, and job swapping is perfectly adequate if it's done strategically. It can really make a big increase in your income, and if done correctly, can position you with the right businesses for a next 3 to 5 year period. But just don't do it at whim because you've got an extra 5-10 grand from someone. You have to really think about it and what that might mean down the track. When you get refused by all these jobs and you can't get a job with anyone, despite having all this great experience, what ends up happening to these people is that they end up having to take a job that is under where they're at, or they get to take a job in another industry. They end up taking a job that they don't like with a company that has a bad culture, or they end up taking a job for much less money, and people take advantage of that. And once you're in there, it's very hard to incrementally build that back up again. So swapping around for the aim of getting more money can build you up in the short term. It can also force you to come back down again in the long term. And when you finally do get a role, you might have to be there for 3 years in a role you don't like, in a company you don't like, just so you can get back up to where you were at a point of 5-10 years ago. So do it carefully. That's my advice. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about negotiation, in particular, salary negotiation. Something that I know a lot of you watching are not going to be looking forward to doing, and really no one enjoys it, but critical part of moving up the ladder and getting the job you want at the right fair and reasonable amount. So as a negotiation, let's break that down. I mean, the goal of the negotiation itself, it should be to get a win-win outcome. You want to walk away making sure that you feel like you're satisfied, and the employer, they don't want to come away from it feeling like they were disadvantaged, that they've spent too much hiring you, because if they do, what that means is going to be a lot of pressure for you in that first 6 months. When you're going through that probation, they're thinking straight away, okay, this person better be good. I'm paying good money, this person better be good, they better be picking things up well, they better be putting in the extra hours, and they've got to justify the money that they're asking for. And if they would deem it to be above what that role should be paying, then you're going to have to really meet their expectations. So bear that in mind. Probably the most important thing about a salary negotiation is being prepared. You need to walk in there with some preparation in your mind. You need to be able to go in there and think, what is my goal? Number one, what is the goal of the negotiation for you? What do you want to get out of it? What is the salary that you're targeting? Number two, what is your reserve? What is your point where you will not cross? The lowest salary that you will not cross, where you feel that you can move forward on that basis, and you're okay with that. What is that figure? And then, what is the number that you're going to ask for? Because it needs to be higher than that. You need to build some fat into that margin. So when you do have these conversations, there's a little bit of manoeuvrability for it to drop down, and you still be in a position where you can move forward. If you go in straight for the kill, hoping that they're going to be so nice to you and offer you what you want, and you give the exact right number, let me tell you, it doesn't happen. They're always going to try and undercut you a lot of the time, by my experience. So make sure you've got your reserve, and then you've got the amount that you're going to ask for. Know what these figures are and know what this is. Very critical. The third thing that you're probably going to need to think about as well is, and people, they can be a bit one track, one focused. They one dimensional in their approach. Sometimes when it comes to this, they're thinking money, dollars, comparatively. This is what I earned in the past. This is what I've been earning. This is what Bob earns over at this firm, and I should get that too if I'm moving jobs. What you need to take into account as well is there are non-monetary considerations that throughout a salary negotiation can be considered to help offset concessions on either the employer side or the candidate side. And some of these things can mean a lot more than money, and sometimes people don't think about these a lot. And this is yet again where some of these preparations, in step one of the goals is, what do you want to get out of this? You've got some tick boxes you want to get, and every candidate that comes through my door, and every person I speak to that I place into another job, they've got some criteria that are important to them. And no doubt, money is always up there, and sometimes more or less with certain people at certain stages of their lives in certain scenarios. But other things are going to be, location, some of the opportunities to progress your career there, the leader you have, can you work with them? Do they inspire you? Do you want to strangle them? What about the people you work with? So these things, some of these, you just won't know until 6 months down the track. One thing about negotiations and salary negotiations are a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing them. They hide from doing these, having these difficult conversations. Sometimes you find out later that the person that you're working with is on a higher amount of money than you. Sometimes they've been here less time, sometimes they're not as good. But one thing they may have done is had the kahunas to actually go in and ask for something that you didn't feel comfortable doing. And now is the time to negotiate when you're joining a business. It's a lot easier to do so when you're joining a business than it is when you're in the business. So you have to really take into consideration that it's okay to negotiate. It's okay to ask for money. They're not going to get scared off. In fact, as long as you do it diplomatically and strategically, they may respect you more for it. And scarcity and demand. When people feel that it's not easy, they may actually be more than happy to offer you more money and value you in a different way than if you just accepted their lowest offer and said thank you very much. The other thing too is, a lot of the time they're expecting you to negotiate. It's very rare in my experience that an employer, will put forward their best offer up front. Sometimes they do, and that's great, and I respect them for it, and it shows they value the person. They don't play games. Excellent. However, it's probably the exception rather than the rule. So they're expecting you to negotiate. They're lowballing you, expecting you to negotiate. And you have to also take into account, recruitment, I do it for a living, but a lot of people despise it. They don't want to sit there and interview all these people and go through all this stuff and go to all this time invested and spent in there, only get to the end of the process, they find the person they want, they give them a job offer, the person asks for an extra $5,000, and then they say, oh no, let's go back to the drawing board again, when they may have spent upwards of 2 weeks on this recruitment exercise, writing jobs, interviewing candidates, speaking to agents, reading profiles, having more than one interview, rescheduling all their time. You've got to think of how much their time is worth. Despite the value of their time, getting to that process and have to start again, that's soul destroying. So take into account, it's okay to negotiate. So the other area we're going to talk about is job offers. And before we get to the job offer, it's customary for a discussion to be had on salary expectations. We actually have a video about this. I can link it at the end of this video. It's really helpful. It's about someone asking you, whether it be a recruitment agency or software, a job board or employer, what are your salary expectations? And it's often a question that's asked so early into the piece, which can be a trap to answer that. It's a way of eliminating you. So what you need to do is be mindful of how to answer that question, because you want to leave the answer to that at the very end. One, because you're not educated enough on the opportunity to know what you think a salary fair would be at the beginning of the process. Two, because you need to build value in yourself as a potential candidate. And if all they can see is dollars, they're not going to see what else you've got to bring to the table, whether it be technical or non-technical. So that's where their focus needs to be. You need to leave that to the end, and you don't want to be giving ranges. We don't want to be giving salary ranges, because anything above the bottom, they don't listen to. So our focus needs to be on holding off until the end before we talk dollars. That video will tell you a lot about how you can navigate through that and responses you can give to ensure that you're getting to the last part of the process when your value is highest before you actually have that conversation. When you're also assessing, your current salary or your last salary, something to take into account is, if you've been with a business for 3, 5, 10 years, over time, you may have built goodwill with that business, got some runs on the board, and they may have been those incremental changes that we discussed earlier, which have lifted up your salary. But when you're going to another business, you're applying for another job, or you're being headhunted, or whatever that might be, you're a fresh prospect to them, and they haven't seen what you're capable of doing. You know, when you are moving one company to another and accepting a job offer or rejecting one, it does pay to have a bit more of a thorough understanding of your current package, so you have a basis of which to compare. And some of that can be as easy looking at, in some cases, your take-home pay, after tax, because there may be vehicle allowances, different levels of superannuation, different allowances that you haven't really taken into account. So, those are things you can compare, but definitely your take-home packet, and then really look at that on a monthly basis, a weekly basis. So when you break down what you'd be potentially getting from this other job offer, you've got to look at, from a cash flow perspective, am I going to be better off or worse off? Can I afford to be better off or worse off? Because in today's world, a lot of us, we live to our means, not a dollar more. So, it might sound great on paper, you've got all these different things, but when you break it down, you've actually got $200 less per week. And yeah, sure, you're driving around this vehicle, but that doesn't really help you, because now you can't afford to pay your mortgage. So when it comes to job offers, you've got the verbal offer, which could come from the recruiter, it could come from the prospective employer, in the meeting or on the phone, or maybe even they may send something through via email. And often that will happen prior to receiving a formal offer, which will come as an agreement, contract of employment. With that initial offer, maybe you've in the second interview, the first in some cases, maybe it's the third. We've talked dollars. They said, okay, we would like to offer you $90,000 plus super for this role. You're in a situation where you don't have to give an answer right then and there. I'd recommend, if you set a certain timeline, it's good to be able to try and stick to that. It may be they offer you on Friday afternoon, you say you'll get back on Monday. It may be that they offer you on Wednesday and you say you get back by close of business the next day. It's okay to ask for more time, but if you do specify a time, my recommendation is you get back to them either by that time when you say, or even earlier, with your list of concessions, with your agreement, with your rejection, whatever that might be. But it does set a good tone if you can meet up to the expectation that you set there. You've had a thought about the offer, and maybe you're reviewing the contract, maybe it hasn't come out yet, but they've given you an offer. You said you were going to come back to them, now it's time to come back. You know what you want to ask for. This is when you've got to be very confident. You'll be able to go back there and say, thank you so much for the offer. I've had some time to consider it. It's a big decision for me. And when I weigh up the fact that I really was impressed with your business, how you presented, what it's like to work here, the sort of job I'd have and what I'd be doing, and the position that you have in the marketplace, I've got some real interest. But in order for me to give 100% and to move forward comfortably, I wouldn't be able to do so in less than 110,000 plus super. I look forward to your feedback. In answering it that way, what you've said to them is, you've had to think about it, you're interested for legitimate reasons, you want to make this work, but after considering the requirements of the role, a well-considered salary and what you need to be happy, this is what it looks like. And what they're going to do is they're either going to match it, or they're going to say no, or they're going to try and meet the middle. Often, if you say it in the way that I've said it, and you've built good rapport throughout the process, if you're asking for something reasonable and fair and it's not too much higher than what their offer is, in a lot of cases they'll give you the money that you want. Or if they can't, they may find other ways to try and accommodate you. It may be that you say, okay, well, I'm really keen to move forward. I know that you weren't able to meet my 110,000 the way it was. How about, because I'm happy to back myself in and I'm confident what I can do and bring to the table, let's set some KPIs. If you agree to them, if I'm able to do this, this and this within the first 6 months, you'll increase my salary from 100,000 to 110,000. Would you find that fair and reasonable? If they're happy with that, and they may stipulate what that might look like, or they may have some other ideas of what those things may be, and you feel you're worth that, and they would agree that if you can do those things, so that would be a fair salary, but you just haven't had a chance to prove yourself yet, that can be something you can agree upon. You've got to make sure, however, that's written in writing, ideally in an employment agreement, at the very least in writing. You want to make sure at the end of that 6-month mark that they hold themselves accountable to agree to that if you've set those targets and you've met them. You have to try and use if-then language. If I can do this, then you'll be agreeable with this. Is that correct? And you have to try and put yourself in their shoes. You want to get a mutually beneficial outcome, that win-win we talked about before. So that's a good way of trying to approach it if you get a bit of a deadlock, so that you can both make accommodations and then commit to something that could work for both parties. Final thing to consider here, when you're going to negotiate and you want to be having these sort of conversations, the best way is to do so face-to-face. You want to be able to read their body language. You want to be able to go in there confident, so you can show that confidence about that figure, that well-considered figure you need to move forward. You need them to see that confidence. They need to buy into that. And also, it makes it harder for them to say no. Also, you can reach a better agreement and a more likely mutually beneficial agreement if you're face-to-face, or at the very least in some sort of a video conference, so there's some sort of remote process happening. Don't do it via email. Never do it via email. It's lazy and it doesn't work. And if it does, you're lucky, because you're just trying to avoid the awkwardness of the situation. And in the end, you pay with real dollars. Compensation packages, they can be complex. They have a lot of different fundamentals which comprise what a company can compensate you with, not just all financial. We talked about this a little bit earlier. So things like, vehicle allowances, bonuses, leave allowances for all different types of leave, looking at travel, looking at equity, looking at shares of a business, a whole host of different types of initiatives to try and help you, get value out of the business and your time there. So all these different things, inclusive of, how many hours you work at the office, if you have rostered day off, if you get 6 weeks worth of leave instead of 4, how they look after your parental care leave, those sort of things, often become more of a consideration when you're actually in the role, but should be considered at the time of accepting a role as well. So when we're talking compensation packages, we've got to think outside of just the dollars and cents. It should be something that you evaluate when you're accepting a job offer, or reading through an agreement and comparing that with your current situation, because it may not be something that you think about as much when you're joining, but it's once you're in the role that it becomes more paramount. Some of these compensation packages can really offer a range of different benefits. So we're looking at things like, do you get 6 weeks worth of annual leave? Do you get 4 weeks? What sort of paid parental situation do you have? Are you going to be getting shares? Is it a publicly listed company? You got some sort of opportunity for equity or buying into the business? What about superannuation percentages? What about vehicle allowances or physical vehicles? Maybe there is tools, maybe there is uniforms, there might be travel involved in the role. A lot of these different things can actually become, they're worth their weight in gold when you need them. So make sure you evaluate them when you're at the job offer stage and the consideration of whether to move forward or not, whether to have a concession on something, be flexible on something else, or ask for something else that's important to you. At the end of the day, you go in, you do all the things you can in order to be able to try and best position yourself to get the salary that you want, which you feel you can live up to and is sustainable. And if you try everything that I've suggested, and at the end of the day, you want the job, they're not going to be flexible on the things that you've asked. You've got a decision to make, and if you decide to accept, that's fine. If you decide to turn it down, that's also fine. But what you will have is you will have a complete free conscience without any regret that you could have asked for more, you could have tried different tactics. If you accept that role, you know what you're dealing with, and it's for the right reasons because you've taken the time to think about it and you've gone through things comprehensively, which is all you can hope to do. But odds are if you take these steps, you're going to be able to hopefully come ahead with a higher opportunity for remuneration, for career opportunities that may be negotiated as a result of these conversations that you're prompted to have, which if you just let slide, you take it on its merits and you hope for the best, down the track may come to bite you. And just remember, make sure you go into these discussions as prepared as possible. You may find that at the end of the day, you just have to go with your gut. Sometimes your gut is very intuitive and can lead you towards making the right decision. That's why I talked about not rushing things, asking for time, making sure you're in a situation where you build as much value as possible. So they're putting their best foot forward, you put your best foot forward. Everything's being considered on both sides. And, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If your gut tells you to move forward, then do it. If it doesn't, and you've got something niggling in the back of your mind, maybe you should listen to it. A lot of people say, I'm not going to take the first offer that comes. I think maybe that's not the right way to think about things. I think, you have to try and be active and survey the marketplace. If you are looking for a job, don't just look at that one job. Try and see what else is out there at the time. Try and move for the right reasons and try and negotiate on the right terms. But if you just assume that there's another perfect job that's around the corner, assumptions can be dangerous. Hoping that you got some value out of today's video. It's a big one and we covered a lot of ground. I think, if there's any different tactics from this that you've been able to utilize in going through a job hunting process and negotiating a salary, if you could, write a comment below and make reference to that, that'd be great. I'd love to hear if anything was useful. If you've had some additional experiences or insights other people watching this might get value out of, feel free to put a comment. Make sure you press like because it does show us support and help to encourage us to keep making videos. And please subscribe because then these continual videos we make, we'll be making regularly. You'll be getting access to them on a weekly basis as they come out. Great for job hunters, great for employers looking to attract and retain quality people, and great for people who want to climb the corporate ladder. So see you in the next video and thanks for joining us.